Hey there, you awesome people. I hope your day has been nothing short of fantastic. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku Had Green Lightning. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. If you're totally vibing with this what if scenario, drop me a comment and let your thoughts be known. And while you're at it, don't miss out on other mind-blowing what ifs on this channel. Alright, without further ado, let's dive straight into this video. Izuku yawned. He had stayed up way too late the night prior studying the textbooks, and as the rest of the class began getting up to prepare for their first of a dozen days training ultimate moves, he had to prepare for one of his first days being tutored by none other than Principal Nezu. His classmates were all gathered downstairs, eating light breakfasts with their hero costumes in their cases nearby. Comparatively, Izuku had a massive bundle of books, notes and his laptop tucked under one arm, as the other was holding an open book, one on high-level particle polarity. He managed to successfully avoid all the silver cases. To this day Bakugo believed Izuku had a second quirk that gave him his sixth sense when reading and walking. He went to the kitchen and began creating his breakfast, a special diet from Recovery Girl, to speed up his recovery post-quirk overuse, who was, needless to say, not impressed. Regardless, he made the high-energy meal and sat down at the table, picking at it and flipping further through the book. He was now about halfway through, starting some time last night, early in the morning, whilst his friends around him continued talking. He got lost in the information, something that he tended to do quite a bit. It began with the way magnets worked, which then scaled up into the Earth's magnetic field, and how, as a result of the iron core in the center of the Earth, it was able to repel various magnetic fields that would otherwise basically melt humanity. But more interesting to him was the way the polarity was produced by the molten iron in the center. Furthermore, occasionally the Earth's polarity would just flip on a dime, seemingly caused by. "Dude, just stop. I feel dumb enough already," Kaminari called out across the dining room. Izuku blushed in embarrassment and shrunk into the chair, clamping his mouth shut. Bakugo cackled loudly at Izuku's embarrassment whilst Iida and Todoroki comforted the embarrassed boy. However, it didn't take long for Aizawa-sensei to show up, popping his head through the door, and call all the students, bar Izuku, to go to one of the gyms to start their training. The students rose quickly and filed outside with their cases in hand, and in Bakugo's case, Yuirozu's hand in the other. Izuku meanwhile left the bundle of books by the door for him to pick up as he went upstairs, grabbing some more notebooks and pens. He got changed, and after collecting the items by the front door, he turned off the lights to the dorms, as he made his way to Principal Nezu's office. Just before he could knock on the door, it swung open, and Izuku only barely didn't stumble as he saw Nezu there with his ever-present smile. "Ah, Izuku. I've been expecting you. Now, let's not waste any time, bring those books to the teaching room," Nezu said, walking by a slightly stunned Izuku. The boy quickly regained his senses and ran to catch up with his current teacher. When they got there, he could see it had been remodeled slightly. Along with the whiteboard, there was a digital display and a small testing chamber. The small testing chamber consisted of what seemed to be dense, yet clear concrete, perhaps an extension of Cementus's quirk. He would ask Nezu in a moment, with a small metal claw that was probably to replicate a hand on the inside, connected to a metal coil on the outside. Nezu hopped up to the desk, and using the open computer began loading up a presentation he had prepared earlier. He gestured for Izuku to put down the textbooks, which he was quite grateful for, and to open up his notebooks, specifically the one containing details regarding his own quirk. "Now, while we are getting ready, are there any preliminary questions or statements?" Nezu spoke, smile present and eyes locked onto his screen. "Yes actually," Izuku said, looking at the testing chamber. "Is this clear cement Cementus is doing?" "Indeed," Nezu replied, his smile brightening. "It is in part from my initiative to inspire more creative quirk use. He can modify the properties to an extent, and as such was able to create transparent cement. I like to inspire my staff to better themselves as heroes, and as such can inspire students to do similar." Although, the metal claw was part from Power Loader and part from none other than Mei Hatsume. Being really honest, that didn't surprise him too much. The student and teacher fell into a calm silence as they prepared themselves. Soon, Izuku had prepared a section in each of his notebooks, and Nezu had opened up the presentation in his own notes. "Let's begin then, shall we?" Nezu asked, looking at Izuku. Izuku nodded, and the two began the first of many lectures. The first was about the basics of Izuku's quirk, from Nezu's understanding from filmed footage of the entrance exam, his class's hero trainings, the sports festival, the exams, footage from him fighting All for One, from the USJ incident, and footage he managed to get of the fight against Stain. Izuku knew it was best to not ask too many questions about that. Once Nezu finished with the visible practical application, he asked Izuku to fill him in on the theory side of things. Well, in short, we have time, Izuku. If we want to raise your quirk's creative uses, we need to be both fully aware of its current capabilities. Of course, that makes sense. Well, it allows me to produce, control and store this green lightning. I can manipulate it in any way I want, however production takes energy and manipulation takes mind power. As you saw in the USJ clip, after excessive complex use, i.e. boosting someone else, it has a mental drawback. Manipulation can come in the form of using it to boost myself, others, destroy objects, or like normal electrical pulses in tandem with machinery or electrocution. However, typically sending excessive amounts from certain parts of my body can result in numbness, such as was the case by the end of the USJ. Izuku finished explaining. Nezu hummed thoughtfully, before rubbing his paws together. Can you control polarity? Well, I was trying to before the camp and had a few ideas for it, but so far unsuccessful. Did you read the polarity textbook? Yes. Great. Let's try again, this time put it through the metal claw hand, and we'll start with basic magnets. And so they did. Nezu dropped in a few magnets into the testing chamber, and gestured for Izuku to try it. They started with his basic green lightning, without him controlling any other details regarding it. He gripped the metal rod, and closed his eyes. He could feel the lightning flow through his arm, and into the cold metal. The metal claw almost felt like an extension as the lightning went through it. He began circulating the lightning through the metal claw, failing to do anything to the magnets. Izuku frowned as he withdrew his hand, but Nezu seemed unsurprised. It seems that we need to reassess the way you use your quirk. From fundamentals. Oh boy. Several hours, textbooks and various snacks later, and together, Izuku and Nezu had gone over almost every aspect to the scientific links of quirks, regarding the biology of the evolution, to psychology of activating the quirk. Then and only then could they completely dissect Izuku's quirk, its activation conditions, and put solid numbers on everything from his capacity, to current flow, to his approximated growth rate, after a few days once his quirk returned to normal. And then they were able to dissect the green lightning itself. Using a perpetuation machine and shooting a small sample of his quirk through it, they were able to analyze and understand the parameters for his control. Honestly though, Izuku was really excited to be able to take such great control over his quirk. As they discovered, he could also control density, light levels, the speed of the flow, polarity, spread, and temperature. They suspected that he had, prior, unconsciously controlled each aspect in a vague sense to achieve some goal. But now he was fully aware. They created a regimen for the remainder of the day that would require minimal energy use, but instead would focus on his quirk activation and mentality. After the two took a break for lunch, Nezu brought out a cheese platter, crackers and sandwiches. They dived straight into Izuku's training, effectively using the perpetuation machine to measure each aspect, whilst Izuku would almost completely nullify some aspects whilst highly boosting others. They spent several hours doing various combinations for various purposes, before Nezu decided it was time to wrap up. Well Izuku, I believe we have made great progress today. I look forward to your continued tutelage. Izuku smiled gratefully and finished packing up. Thank you sir, it's an honor. Oh, and if you wouldn't mind going to Recovery Girl's office to pick up your girlfriend. Eh? As it turned out, Nezu knew everything. Izuku didn't know why he was so surprised this time. Regardless, he was fairly worried, but Nezu explained it was a simple case of her quirk backfiring. After the incident at the hospital, Nejire was under Recovery Girl's training to get a hero medical license, seeing as the ability to do what she did could be quite helpful. Soon Izuku arrived and Recovery Girl was at her desk, going over some files. Ah, your girlfriend is currently on the bed dearie. She accidentally used too much of her energy, and it all went a bit haywire. I see. Thank you Recovery Girl. Izuku made his way to the aforementioned bed, and gently shook the shoulder of his dozing girlfriend. Hey Nejire, let's get you back to your dorm. Oh, issue? She mumbled, not lifting her head off the pillow. Honestly, it was adorable with her hair spread across the bed and the sheets, making it appear more like a light blue plant was blown over. I'm here to take you to your dorm, he said, standing next to her. Suddenly, she shot up at the idea, and Izuku could almost feel Recovery Girl's eye roll, as her hair draped around her shoulders, and her eyes became a little brighter. Woohoo, Boyfriend Express. Nejire cheered, pumping her fist in the air. Izuku blushed a little, and simply crouched down, indicating for her to hop on, and he would give her a piggyback. She did so, latching on with her legs around his waist and arms around his neck. Once latched on, Nejire's hair draped across both of their shoulders. Thanks, Recovery Girl. See you tomorrow. Yes, now young man, make sure your girlfriend eats plenty and gets decent sleep tonight. Recovery Girl commanded to the young man, who nodded in response, careful not to hit Nejire in the face, although if her giggling was anything to go by, his hair did tickle her. He bid farewell to the elderly youthful hero, and carried Nejire to the dorms. On the way he could tell she was just a tad delirious. By her questioning of why his hair smelled like mint, she was also maybe slightly hallucinating, but he kept her engaged cause it was still fun. Spending time with her always was. Izuku's smile shone through in his voice, and if Nejire's chipper voice was anything to go by, she liked his smile too. Eventually they made it to the 3 dorms, and Izuku noticed that Tamaki and Mirio were currently out, so it was just the energy court couple. Izuku placed his girlfriend on the couch, who immediately almost melted into the couch cushions, and gave her the remote as he went to the kitchen. It wasn't as well stocked as the one at dorm, but there was definitely far more variety, from swordfish to octopus. Izuku thought for a moment, before getting the ingredients to make katsudon when he felt a pair of arms wrap around his waist. It didn't take a genius to guess who it was, but he still blushed. Hey Nejire. Hey, what you making? Oh, just katsudon. It's one of the few things I know how to make well. Ooh, sounds good. Hey, do you mind if I keep doing this while you cook? No? Great. Note to self, Tyrant Nejire is really affectionate. Izuku didn't honestly have an issue with it, but he did have to expend a little extra energy trying to drag his girlfriend behind him, as he moved around the kitchen, preparing the meal. He did manage to get it done, and after coercing, Note 2, Tyrant Nejire is slightly irrational, her with cuddles, he managed to get Nejire to sit at the table so they could eat. He smiled as Nejire's eyes lit up slightly, before she proceeded to devour it and fly into the kitchen to get more. Izuku chuckled as he ate his own. Nejire had 3 servings. During one of the flights she said the practice process took a lot of energy, before slumping in her chair, and mumbling something about needing to be carried upstairs. Izuku finished and complied, kissing her forehead as he picked her up piggyback style again. She nuzzled into his neck and she clung onto him like a koala. It was adorable. He carried her upstairs and she unlocked the door, while still clinging to him with her other arm. Izuku gently moved the blankets and covered her with the sheets and blankets. She rolled over to her side as Izuku finished up, and kissed her cheek. Good night, Nejire. Sleep well, Izuku said as he stepped back and flipped the light off. Good night, Ishu. Love you, she mumbled. Izuku blushed, but didn't hesitate as he answered. Love you too, Nejire. Soon the next few days came and went, and Nezu and Izuku continued working on more complicated theories and applications. By the second day, Izuku and Nezu had figured out how to use the metal claw, and began doing some refinement of his ranged attacks. After extensive levels of practice, he was able to properly direct them with far less chaos, and his immediate control improved. In other words, Nezu completely retaught him how to use his quirk. And it opened up so many doors. The third day they spent using a life-size cross-section of a human, which neither batted an eye at, to properly examine and make full and most efficient use of his quirk boosts. It was fascinating, making sure to take full use of sending energy directly to muscles, tendons, blood veins, heart, lungs, skin and bones for strength, resilience, and to make sure he doesn't completely die. The final day they spent together was spent working more with polarity, and helping Izuku with the more creative uses. And that is how you could propel a projectile, or reflect a projectile, Nezu finished. Izuku nodded, and put into practice using the claw. It took no time whatsoever as the two had completely done all the maths and calculations behind it beforehand. They were running on such close brain waves that it took no time for the two to get to work on an idea they had, from battle strategy to quirk use. It didn't take long for Izuku to put the small-scale version into practice, and the two smiled at the progress. I think that wraps us up for today, Izuku. Good job over the past few days. You will be able to go straight into tomorrow's ultimate move training with ideas that will shock your classmates. Hopefully not literally. Now, do you have the notes and maths regarding the details of your quirk and any calculations? Twice over and memorized, sir, Izuku responded as he retracted his hand, but I will miss working with Yo. Do not worry about that. We will be continuing our lessons on some different subjects once the school term starts again, as your intelligence in a majority of subjects has far surpassed the third year's level. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, Izuku, you earned and worked for it. Now go on, get a good night's rest for tomorrow. I think Aizawa wouldn't appreciate you being too tired to jump straight into work. Thank you, sir. I look forward to working with you in the future. As do I. To a better generation of heroes, Nezu said, with a cup of tea suddenly in his paws and a cup in front of Izuku. Izuku didn't even blink as he picked it up, clinked it to Nezu's. To a better generation of heroes. Soon the next day came and Izuku was allowed to go to the self-proclaimed training dining land with the rest of 1A, who were all ready and eager, Bakugo especially, to show what he had gotten up to. Izuku grabbed his hero case and noticed the sticky note on it. Ah, Mei made the modifications. Wonderful, he thought as he walked to the changing rooms with the rest of the boys. They got changed and made their way to the dedicated gym. Okay everyone, today is going to be your third to last session, before it is time for the provisional license exams. You should all at least have one move done, or plans completed for both. Izuku, this includes you, as I know you and the rat have been up to some weird shenanigans that I want no part of, but will hopefully increase your potential. Aizawa-sensei directed them as they gathered out the front. Soon Ectoplasm sent out his clones, but Izuku stayed at a lower vantage point. One of the Ectoplasm clones was staring at Izuku, and launched a peglet kick at his head, but was a little surprised to see it bounce off a small shield of green lightning. Ah, I see that training with the principal gave you ideas. Yes, sensei, one of the ideas was repulsion, you see. Save it for someone who understands, I'm just here for the practical part. The clone cut him off. Izuku blushed. He was about to start mumbling about the method of particle repulsion, but quickly snapped out of it. Well, my first ultimate move idea is a defensive one. I need a large-scale attack directed towards me so I can demonstrate and try it out, Izuku explained, fixing the new metal gauntlets onto his hands. They were form-fitting, painted a neon green, and were to help with the new moves. The clone nodded, and called out to another one. Soon, Bakugo flew down and smirked. So, I'm here to shoot your ass. Pretty much. Bakugo was a little taken aback, but lined himself up for his new ultimate move, AP shot, a highly accurate dense explosion. He closed his eyes and directed his right palm outwardly facing to Izuku, the left hand used to create a small circle. He breathed in. AP shot. He screamed as the move went off. It caught the attention of several classmates that saw the attack towards Izuku, and were wondering what on earth the slightly chaotic pair were up to. Repulsion. Single target. Izuku countered, and a crash of green lightning appeared in front of him, effectively creating a wall of green lightning at the last moment. It shimmered brightly, and Bakugo saw the concentrated beam of his explosion coming back towards him. Shit. He screamed as he propelled himself out of the way of the reflected attack. He did manage to move out of the way, and instead the explosion harmlessly crashed into the side of the cement mountain. All those that were watching had their mouths open in awe, except Aizawa-sensei. He wasn't too surprised that the kid and rat had done some stupid shit. Izuku explained in simpler language what he had done, although it still seemed too much Kaminari, before he asked the clone he was working with if they could go outside. Why is that? Well, the move I want to do is kind of unpredictable. I have all the theory down, it's just I don't want to completely destroy anything. Understandable. The two went just outside the gym, and Izuku held his palms out. Using the gauntlet, he dispensed a small, magnetized piece of rubber. The things quirks could help technology do these days was amazing, and cupped his hands. He started by closing his eyes, and breathing in. His quirk activated primarily on his arms, rotating around rapidly. It could be seen on his gauntlets that the green lightning was circulating, and also crackling off of the metal glove. Additionally, there was spinning green lightning around the outside of his two hands, whirring. The crackling noise combined with the whirring was, admittedly, not quite what Izuku intended, but he could work on that later. For now, he had to focus on the speed, density, and polarity. The issue was that if he didn't time the polarity just perfectly, the aiming would be way off. So he waited until it was perfected. It took about 5 seconds before he fired the shot. The result was simple. A speeding rubber ball with a trail of lightning green, going faster than anyone could naturally see. Even the ectoplasm clone, after being a seasoned pro for years, couldn't see it moving, and it only appeared as a momentary blur, faster than he could blink. The only proof of the existence of the shot was the hole through many, many trees that were now knocked over, and the roaring wind and noises that followed. Boy, how strong was that? Fairly weak. Didn't want to break anything on my first try. Well then. We'll bring you inside as your classmates should be winding up, and we'll have you fire a stronger shot against the cement. I'm sure Nezu taught you all you should need to know to go no further than the structure. In response, Izuku flipped open his notebook, one that had been duplicated for his hero costume, and pointed to a particular page with many calculations. All for this one answer. Yep. Cool, let's head in. Soon all the class had vacated the TDL, but remained in the gym to watch what was about to go down. They were behind thick clear cement walls that Cementus had made for them for their safety, and members of 1B had started filing in as well. They were due to start in about 10 minutes. Izuku breathed in and out. There was a crowd, but he should be alright. He had already done the measurements, and knew exactly how much energy this should need to go exactly all the way through. Railgun shot. The whirring rose up and the students and teachers all hushed as they watched the green lightning intensify. What happened next was a deafening crash as the fired shot immediately broke the sound barrier and smashed straight into the cement wall. It bored all the way through and popped out the other side, the kinetic energy spent. However, most of the students heard the sound and failed to see anything, their eyes not ones of seasoned pros, all of whom were substantially shocked, thankfully not literally. What was that for? To prove how bad one is compared to us. Monoma taunted. Not to be mean, but he kind of has a point. Mineta said, before Aizawa-sensei spoke up. That's because he has far outpaced you all, he said bluntly, causing all students to stiffen up suddenly. Izuku's quirk used in this case has far surpassed not only your own abilities, but probably most of the pro heroes here. We struggle to even notice the projectile being fired, but if you need proof it happened, look at the structure. All students directed their gaze to the structure to see the massive concrete structure with a hole all the way through, with cracks quickly increasing around it. It didn't take long for the entire structure to collapse after that. Whoops. As it turns out, both Izuku and Nezu neglected to add spin to the shot. But Izuku decided to pocket that one away for later. Izuku stretched as he got out of bed, ready for his provisional license exam today. He had his ultimate moves, and he made sure to go back to Nezu to work with them to make sure the fired projectile would spin, several others, and his energy levels higher than they used to be thanks to the training recently, and the time his body decided to go into a brief coma because of it. Woo evolution. The green-haired boy got up and went to brush his teeth, still rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. Once there, he also saw Todoroki, Iida and Bakugo, the latter of whom was less brushing his teeth, but murdering whatever could potentially threaten them. Soon the group of boys headed downstairs to get breakfast. All the costume cases were lined up at the door, so the students had to change into their UA uniform for the arrival, but for now they were enjoying the calm before the storm. After Iida filed everyone onto the bus, Aizawa-sensei came on and the students all quickly hushed. I'm glad to see everyone punctual. It's a good start. Now, take advantage of this time to steal your nerves. Don't bother me until we're there. Fittingly, the man proceeded to pull out his sleeping bag, zip himself up and collapse across two of the front seats. The class didn't bat an eye and proceeded to engage in quiet chatter, all of them varying degrees of excited and nervous. Personally, Izuku was quite nervous. Whilst his defensive ultimate move, repulsion, was down to a mathematical art based on impact velocities, desired targets to protect, and many other things, his offensive railgun shot was more than a little dangerous to use against other people, especially against other students. He had a few other ideas for different offensive ultimate moves, but unfortunately that would have to wait. For now, he'd need to make sure he avoided using anything too strong against other students. He engaged in planning conversations with Todoroki and Iida, the three of them trying to deduce what the test could potentially involve. Well, I imagine there would be some form of heroic response, such as rescuing or teamwork, but I can't imagine they'd be able to do that for all the examinees. Maybe only a couple hundred, Todoroki pitched in, and the other two boys hummed in agreement. So some form of weeding out then. On our own terms, so only the strongest can get through, Izuku added. I imagine that makes the most logical sense. Pitting us against each other to a certain degree, Iida spoke, waving his arms around. The three boys seemed in agreement at that, falling into a comfortable silence as they each went through their own preparation. Izuku went through all the calculations in his head again, making sure he was certain and practicing it by saying he had to reflect randomly spotted cars and other vehicles. Iida was going through a mantra of concentration and inspiration, mostly consisting of ingenium quotes. Todoroki was going through a weird combination of relaxation and effectively hype exercises, trying to be calm, but energetic. The trio remained this way for the remainder of the ride, before Aizawa-sensei magically awoke the moment they all arrived. "Alright, everyone off," he said, getting up and walking off the bus as though he hadn't just slept for half an hour. Everyone complied, quickly filing off the bus as to avoid irritating their teacher. Soon everyone was gathered outside, as the bus drove off and Aizawa-sensei gathered their attention. "Alright everyone. Today, if you do indeed succeed in obtaining your provisional licenses, you eggs will hatch into novice chicks." It was a unique inspirational speech, but it served its purpose. The class cheered, and Kirishima huddled everyone around. "Alright everyone, the usual, on 3. 1, 2, 3, Kirishima counted the class in. Plus. Alter. A voice cut in, making the class jump. "Inasa. It's rude to interrupt other people's huddles." A student scolded, and the UA students looked up. In front of them were members of Shiketsu High. "That's right. UA in the east, Shiketsu in the west," Izuku thought as he looked at the students. The person scolding seemed very serious about this, whilst the other students seemed a little more sociable. It included a student with a lot of hair, a girl who looked a little airheaded, and a boy who had interrupted their huddle who seemed incredibly energetic, passionate. I just wanted to do that at least once. I apologize." The boy with the buzz cut, introduced as Inasa, slammed his head into the pavement after bowing at the waist, causing a small amount of blood to trickle out. "Inasa. You need to calm down, otherwise that happens." Kami scolded as the other students nodded. It was hard to tell if the hair guy did, they assumed he did, whilst the serious-looking student pulled out a wad of bandages that had a label reading Inasa's over-enthusiasm. It was quite humorous. "Apologies for him. He is quite enthusiastic and passionate," the hair guy spoke. "We look forward to competing with a fellow high-standard hero school. Good luck, may the best heroes prosper." The hair guy, Inasa, the girl and the serious-looking guy all turned and began walking towards the building. Inasa Urashi. He's a first-year student, took the recommendation exams, Aizawa-sensei spoke, much to the surprise of the class. "You know this dude Aizawa-sensei?" Kaminari asked, surprised. "Yeah. He's strong. He got first in the recommendation exams, but turned down his acceptance for some reason. Not sure why." Aizawa-sensei spoke. "He's stronger than Todoroki." Mineta screamed, panicking. "How will we even pass this? What if we—" "Mineta," Aizawa-sensei cut him off. "Don't ask if you can. Just do it. Prove you deserve to become a cool hero." It was, again, a unique way of encouragement, but it was their teachers. The students were just about ready to go in when another voice interrupted them. "Eraserhead. Is it you?" Izuku could have sworn he heard his teacher utter a fuck before turning to face the woman. "Joke. Funny seeing you here. Wait, if you're here, then that means—" "That's right. Come on kids, these are the UA guys." Ms. Joke called out. "Aizawa-sensei. Who's this?" Mina asked, a sparkle in her eye that meant trouble for anyone involved. Ms. Joke. A pro hero, and teacher at Ketsubutsu of second-year students. Aizawa-sensei begrudgingly answered. "Oh, but I'm so much more to you than that. We worked at the same agency together, where we began a lifelong friendship after saving each other time and time again," Ms. Joke said. Mina's eyes fell at the mention of friendship, before realizing something. "Wait, does that mean you're taking Aizawa-sensei?" Mina asked, and all students, from both schools, turned their eyes towards the increasingly annoyed teacher, whilst Ms. Joke just laughed. At the man's refusal, Ms. Joke answered for him. "Yeah, he's got a husband. I'll leave that to you to figure out. I trust in your abilities," Ms. Joke replied enthusiastically, and Mina beamed in response. Soon after, some of the Ketsubutsu came up to greet the 1A students quite personally, shaking their hands. "Oh, you guys are 1A. That's so cool." A boy came up to introduce himself. "I'm Shindo from Ketsubutsu Class 2-2. "Wait, how do you know we're in 1A? The sports festival. That means we're all vulnerable. We need to stick together." "So why is he being overly friendly? A quirk perhaps?" "No, his build suggests his quirk has a physical recoil or is based off strength to some extent. So he's luring us into a false sense of security with a fake smile and greetings." Koch-chan sees it too, Izuku thought, looking at the blonde from the corner of his eye, as he watched Shindo shake all his classmates' hands. When Shindo approached him, Bakugo and Yoirozu, who had also picked up on his fakeness, probably dating Bakugo, meant she had become a lot sharper in several ways. All of them glared at Shindo, who quickly took the hint and backed away, much to Aizawa-sensei's pride in his students' perceptiveness. Alright you lot, get changed and inside, Aizawa-sensei told them, and the students replied with a quick yes sir. And headed inside carrying their hero costumes with them as they went to get changed. Soon the class was gathered inside and in amongst a massive cluster of people, Izuku had counted about 1500, give or take 50 students. Alright. Let's get this over with, a voice sounded from the PA and all students quickly hushed, and directed their attention to the front. I am Mariaki Miru of the Public Safety Commission. I will be explaining the requirements for your provisional license exam today. As he said this, several other workers walked in, each carrying massive boxes of markers and foam balls. For the first part of this exam, you will be playing a glorified game of dodgeball. Everyone is to put on 3 of these tags. They cannot be hidden by clothing or in obstructed locations, such as under your arms or on the soles of your feet. The diagram came up on the screen, along with a key that showed that each examinee would get 6 orange balls. These foam balls are what you will use to tag others. Don't worry too much about the logistics, it just works. You will each get 6 of them, but can use others as well. The last person to tag someone will get that elimination, and you need 2 eliminations to pass. The man pressed the ball and marker together, and the marker glowed red. This indicates a marker that is out. If all of yours glow red, you have been eliminated and will be required to leave to a designated area, where you can discuss with your teacher what to do next. Some may want you to leave, whilst others will request you stick around and watch. It's not my problem. The guy yawned and stretched, before taking on a much more serious posture and a gaze that intimidated every student in the room. Now, as you know, with the retirement of All Might, there has been an obvious indication that there is a turning of the ages. With the arrest and disbandment of the League of Villains, there is a power vacuum within the underworld. And there is a sense of unease in society. As such, both the Hero and Public Safety Commission have agreed. There needs to be a higher standard of heroes. As such, only the first 100 students to achieve 2 eliminations will continue to the second phase. That's less than a 10% passing rate. It must be to cut down the weeds, but also to put a pressure on us. The words are very carefully chosen. They're trying to get us to panic, focus on the numbers, the words, not the test itself. We need to stick together as a class, Izuku thought as the man was finishing his conclusion, whilst Izuku stuck his 3 targets on himself. One on the inner forearm of his left hand, one on his upper torso and one just above his hip. Lead. Izuku called out, we need to gather the class together and stay as a unit. Trust me on this. Ida nodded in response and gathered the various groups of the class into one. They vaguely understood the need to stick together, but waited for the man to finish his explanation before preparing. Now, I understand everyone has their preferred environments, so we have provided these environments for all of you. As he spoke this, the walls of the building they were in began to open outwards, to a general consensus of that's way over. Everything, this over-the-top nonsense is the primary reason for my sleep deprivation. It was so stupid and unnecessary. Anyway, you have a 5-minute grace. We will announce the start soon. Now go. All the students quickly dispersed in different directions, whilst one is stuck together, Izuku at the helm. Guys. We need to stick together. We're strongest together, and we're already at a disadvantage. Izuku called to them as they remained in the region. Why is that? Mina called back. The sports festival. Our quirks were on display for the whole world to see. Izuku responded, and the class nodded quickly as they understood. Sorry Izuku, but Todoroki started before Izuku cut him off. No Todoroki, I know you think you're stronger on your own, but we need to stick together. The other schools will assume you'll split off based off of your personality during the sports festival, and are almost definitely prepared for you. Same goes for you Koch-chan. We are strongest together. Let's show them we are 1A. Izuku cheered, and the other students cheered in unison. Todoroki and Bakugo nodded in understanding, as they huddled around. Alright guys, here's the plan. Meanwhile, up in the stands, Aizawa was with Ms. Joke. So, you got a full class this year Zawa? Ms. Joke asked. Yeah, what's it to you Joke? Aizawa responded as his eyes remained on the tablet in front of him. All teachers got access to a tablet to be able to watch their students. Cause it looks like you like him. After all, they seem to know about the start of every license exam, Ms. Joke said, the countdown blaring in the background. Not a word. Really? Really? Aizawa replied, looking at his class. It didn't surprise him that Izuku was leading the students, but he was impressed that the green-haired boy managed to keep Bakugo and Todoroki as part of the group. Makes sense, overwhelming firepower that most schools would assume have left the primary group. Well, I hope they figured it out, Ms. Joke said, all the way. Because at the start of every license exam, at this the starting horn blared, and Ms. Joke saw on the tablet all her students jump out to attack the UA group, is the crushing of UA. I'm not worried, Aizawa said, hiding a tiny proud smile in his scarf, as he watched Izuku prepare himself as their first wave of defense. If anything, it'll be the reverse this year. And besides, every hero needs to be able to play with the ball in the opposition's court. Their court known to the world. Think of it as a way UA prepares its students ahead of anyone else's. Wow, that's a lot of shade and more than a little condescending. Do you really think your kids will live up to that though? Ms. Joe questioned as all the students were in a standoff. It's not about what I think. It's about what they do. And I know they will. At this, all schools surrounding UA released the first wave of attacks. Ms. Joke remained highly skeptical, but Aizawa knew what was happening next. As if on cue, a roar of thunder echoed throughout the whole stadium as a bright flash of green appeared on both teachers' tablets. Aizawa wasn't so surprised, but Ms. Joke jumped a little as several of her students, all having had thrown their attacks, had one or two of their targets hit within the first few seconds, along with many other students that weren't her own. During all of their confusion, the second wave of one began to strike, launching dozens of attacks within a matter of seconds. So you think they'll survive the crushing of UA? No, quite the opposite. I think this year the crushing will be done by UA. After the sky-shattering large-scale repulsion, Izuku knew he would be briefly out of commission. It was an unfortunate side effect of such a powerful, large-scale move, but it achieved its purpose by getting all the thrown dodgeballs to be deflected and hit many targets, whilst still none was eliminated. They were all in danger of being eliminated, whilst all the UA students were ready to clean up. Izuku fell behind their ranks with a shield provided from Yoirozu, as Bakugo coordinated the next stage of attack. Bakugo shot up into the air and, using some grenade cases, courtesy of Yoirozu, that he had filled with nitroglycerin, and tossed them in the general direction of where the main groups were situated. These groups quickly scattered as the grenades blew up the ground, making it impossible for them to keep their footing. Following that, Todoroki created several ice ramps for the close-range fighters to use, namely Kirishima, Iida, Mina, Shoji, Sato, Tokoyami, Bakugo, Izuku, Higakure and Ojiro. Each of them were launched with a combination of Sero's tape to launch them, and Uraraka's quirk to make them immune to the effects of gravity briefly. Each close combat student landed on a designated target, and pinned them until they used a cannon, also courtesy of Yoirozu, with Mineta's orbs, in order to keep them there. Each student managed to pin down 2, meaning each student managed to get one of the required 2 eliminations. Whilst each student did that, the longer-ranged fighters warded off any students that attempted to steal Class 1A's pickings, with a combination of blue lasers, birds, sound waves, electricity, stinging poison, courtesy of Asui, and Higakure's invisibility, allowing for her to sufficiently scout out enemy positions. Soon all the 1A students gathered together and, with a few defensive students situated along the outskirts, to keep an eye out as they discussed. Alright, so, summary. Yoirozu can't use her quirk much more after that, so someone will need to help her. Bakugo, I'm putting you on that role. Next, Kaminari is close to crossing his voltage. Jiro, you'll need to stick with him. Furthermore, Koda's quirk is probably lacking animals to call for at this point. Stick with Tokoyami, and perhaps help with controlling Dark Shadow. Uraraka is close to nausea, so she'll need to stay with Tsu. Everyone needs to pair off anyway, and we need to keep moving. Let me know of any other limits about to be crossed. Let's go 1A. Izuku cheered, and his classmates cheered in agreement. It didn't take long for them to mobilize again, after hearing an announcement regarding the 20 eliminations yet no passes so far from the tired-sounding guy, and they traveled to the city region. Jiro and Shoji had managed to track down a group after Koda received word of birds being shot at from someone with a peculiar slingshot quirk. The class sent Higakure to check it out, and from the looks of it, several school groups were having a brawl in the city area. After silently incapacitating the slingshot quirked girl, Higakure signaled for the class to climb up, using lengths of Sero's tape to maneuver their way up the building. Collectively, one had decided that Yoirozu, who was suffering from the most quirk use withdrawal, would have the greatest trouble with a large brawl, and as such, she should take the elimination of the slingshot quirked girl. Unfortunately for that plan, which was unanimous bar one, Mineta quickly stole the elimination for himself when the class were discussing their next move, and Yoirozu was creating a few last utility items for the class to use. Believe it or not, he was the odd one out. Whilst Mineta was running away, Izuku and most of the class sighed deeply. Alright, adjusting the plan. Bakugo, you'll have to stay with Yoirozu, since you two probably have the best teamwork, whilst using a minimal amount materials on her part. You two stay back and try and avoid the primary fighting. Everyone else, we're going to pincer the groups in the crossroads, before some form of incapacitation. Let's do this. Saying that, Izuku jumped down and began running towards one of the streets, sneaking up behind the school there. Alongside him were Todoroki and Iida, as the rest of the class were more evenly distributed across the other 3 zones. All they had to do was wait for a signal. Their first plan was for Bakugo to, from the roof, throw a spare grenade down and disrupt the current fighting, but an announcement from the tired guy. The first student has officially passed. With a little over 120 eliminations. Alright, I am. Way more awake than I thought I would be. At the announcement, all the fighting students paused briefly in shock, and Bakugo took advantage of this to throw the grenade without anyone to notice where he was throwing from, keeping his and Yoirozu's position hidden. The students quickly scattered from the center of the crossroads, and ran back out of the road, all schools intending to regroup before charging back in. Hang on, who are you guys? One of the students, who seemed to have a quirk to do with his fingers, called out. Izuku, Iida and Todoroki did not respond, all of them simply charging up their quirks, and preparing themselves to attack the approaching school. Several stones began flying towards the UA students, courtesy of someone with what seemed to be a minor telekinesis quirk, as the tips of their hands glowed a grey color. The trio of UA students facing off against them dodged with ease as Iida's engine whirring reached the desired point. I'm ready to charge, he announced for his teammates, who both acknowledged it with a nod. In tandem, Izuku and Todoroki produced loud and bright flashes which severely disoriented the other school, and Izuku and Todoroki, but Iida was able to remain capable of attacking the other students. Using Recipro Burst, Iida managed to successfully sweep many legs of the other school, all but a few being made to fall over. Izuku then followed up by zapping several of them, and Todoroki froze the rest. It came down to a standstill between the trio and about half a dozen other students, glaring at each other. Izuku gazed carefully at the other students involved, trying to gauge their quirks. Their hero costumes definitely gave away a lot, for example the student that had the same colors as a magnet. Subtly, thy name is not heroes. Izuku looked around at the other students, and there was still the student with the minor telekinesis and several others that seemed to have non-physical quirks bar one, who had incredibly muscular and large hands. So it's going to be about outpacing their minds. Overwhelming speed will be key, so Todoroki may be at a disadvantage. Izuku thought, eyeing down the remainder of the opposing students. The minor telekinesis user began floating rocks up, and Izuku thought to himself. Are they limited by size? No, otherwise they'd never make it this far with just that weak telekinesis. Then it must be limited to rocks then. So their abilities are probably quite unpredictable but quite strong. Need to watch out for them. Then there's one with the foam canisters, presumably some kind of other unique control quirk perhaps. He was going to go on, but it was clear the other students were becoming agitated as the UA students simply stared them down. Todoroki. Go for the one with the weird fingers and magnet quirk. I'll go for the one with the minor telekinesis and foam canisters. Iida, you'll have to keep the others distracted, but their quirks seem minor, so we trust you. Izuku called out. The other boys simply nodded and charged at the other school, who did the same. Iida was the first, and unsurprisingly fastest, student to make contact with the other school. He propelled himself towards them faster than they could blink, and in a flash, he whipped his right leg up and kicked one of the students' face, knocking them out quickly. The other students were in shock, but in that time Izuku and Todoroki launched towards their respective students. Todoroki was riding on a wave of ice and firing a beam of fire, as the person with the magnetic quirk pulled themselves out of the way, whilst the person with the weird hands created massive finger shields, as their fingers detached and became larger, and seemingly more calloused. Meanwhile, Izuku launched towards the student with the foam canister, and in the blink of an eye, had kicked them in the face. Although it was decidedly less impactful than Iida's, it did succeed in providing enough contact for Izuku to send a shock through them to stun them briefly, as he turned to block an incoming volley of rocks, unfortunately bruising his arms. If I dust the rocks, it'll give them rock dust to work with. That's a bad idea, but since it's clear that they can control rocks well. That should mean Izuku quickly went through some mental calculations, before picking up one of the rocks and bracing himself. Railgun shot. Non-destructive. He called out, and a powerful whirring filled the air. It brought the attention of the other school, allowing Iida to knock out another of their students, before the students started reacting. Many of them ducked out of the way, but the one with the foam canister closed their eyes and used their quirk, making the foam shatter the canister and form in a wall in front of them, and the rock telekinesis user. The latter also activated their quirk, preparing to try and assist in slowing the projectile before it fired. The loud bang and small shockwave formed from the firing of the rock blew back the other students slightly, and accidentally saved another student from Todoroki's fire blast, if the icy glare he got from the boy was any indicator. The rock was fired off at incredible speed, the boy with the telekinesis quirk only being able to activate his quirk on the rock briefly, before it slammed straight into the foam, which slowed it rapidly. The rock was stopped by the foam, before being launched back at a much slower speed. Izuku ducked underneath the rock as the fighting resumed, the other school more desperate after a display of such power. It doesn't look like they can produce more of the foam, so I'll just have to get them to waste it. But how? Izuku's eyes stayed locked onto the foam wall that was yet to be removed, worrying him. Information is a key part of battle, but the trio from UA were at a distinct disadvantage. They couldn't hesitate, but they also couldn't reveal all their cards. Izuku settled on dashing forward and bringing his right leg around in a powerful kick against the foam structure, intent on destroying it. A small barrier of lightning appeared around his designated contact point on his shin, protecting him from any potentially crippling damage as it made contact with the foam, which was apparently solidified. Izuku quickly pulled his leg back and winced in pain, but the foam cracked and crumbled along the center, the foam block splitting in two and crashing down. About 10% of the foam shattered and quickly liquefied again, before sinking into the ground. So it disperses when broken down small enough, but I'm assuming they have more, potentially hidden in vials within their hero costume, Izuku thought as he jumped back. It revealed a swarm of rocks and pebbles prepared to launch at him. Well then, he thought sarcastically, awesome. Izuku prepared lightning in his arms as he braced himself, unable to dodge it all in time as they flew towards him. He breathed out and released several small blasts of lightning, forming a small shield each time. It successfully deflected each rock away from him, and it seemed to break the hold of the telekinesis user on the rocks. So overwhelming sudden force makes them stop, but I need to make sure they can't keep using it. Stepping back so Iida could cross him, and kick some poor student in the stomach, Izuku began increasing the power flowing within him to a higher degree, closer to the levels he had when he fought Stain. Unfortunately, whilst doing that, he allowed the two students he was facing against to prepare a super move against him. Join super move. Sharp foam. The two opposing students yelled as more foam released from now broken vials to form thin casings around probably 100 rocks and pebbles. They soon launched at tremendous combined speeds, and Izuku held his arms up to block. The lightning in his body was pulled to his forearms, and just as the waves of rocks and foam arrived, a loud crash echoed through the air as he created a formation with his lightning to shatter the first wave. It quickly turned every rock and foam construct from the first wave to a fine dust, the foam disappearing and the rock dust remaining on the road. Izuku, with a slightly clearer sight in mind, was able to individually eliminate each flying projectile with ease. Okay, so the foam guy only has a little, probably for last resort defense, and the rock dude will be able to control all that rock dust, but with a lot of effort, so I'll have a brief moment to work, Izuku thought, as he charged himself to capacity. At least it was the plan. Suddenly, the rock dust rose and condensed around Izuku. From the little he could see, it took a ridiculous amount of strain on the rock user's body and mind, but it definitely worked. Izuku quickly found himself unable to move and his vision fading. His chest was being tightened and he was losing breath, however he was barely able to figure out a plan. I just need to destroy the dust more, to a level they can't control. It'll be dangerous, but there's no other choice. I just need to prevent myself from breathing in any of the particles. Izuku took one last breath, and closed his eyes. Soon he was covered completely by the rock structure, and he couldn't help but think about how they were planning to get his targets. Wait till he passes out. That was besides the point. Once he was completely covered, he let the energy stored within himself flow faster and faster, before he released it. It quickly formed a dome in a substantial area around him, Todoroki and Iida only barely not within the zone of green lightning that quickly destroyed anything within it to nothing less than particles. Izuku's head was pounding from that as he had to carefully manipulate his lightning, as to avoid causing a potentially atomic reaction. It was kind of stressful. In a matter of moments he took advantage of the opposing student's metaphorical shock, and turned it into a literal one. He let out a large sigh as he stopped the current flow, having sufficiently shocked the students. Using his capture bracelets, he wrapped it around each of the now knocked out students, and began dragging it to the center of the crossroads, where his classmates did the same. He did a quick headcount of his classmates there, which was 17, before he sent a shot into the air to signal for Bakugo and Yoirozu to come down. Soon after they came down, with another 2 students in their arms that they had beaten Bakugo with a notable amount of scrapes and scratches. Izuku counted the amount of defeated students. After giving the class the go-ahead, they all took the eliminations. Maybe they finished some students' chances this year to get a provisional license. But they were moving on and up. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination.